The dense and towering pines created an eternal twilight, even in the brightest parts of the day. Deep within the forest, paths disappear into an oppressive darkness where ancient and forgotten forces slumber. For centuries, villagers and travelers alike spoke in hushed tones of this haunted place, a forest where magic, creatures of myth, and dark spirits roamed freely, but few dared to venture far for the fear of never returning. The most whispered about legend was that of the Black Forest Gatekeeper, an immortal guardian of the woods, part man, part spirit. His figure was said to be one with the forest, his eyes glowing like the embers, and his voice carried by the wind. It was said that he roamed the forest at night, ensuring that no outsider penetrated the heart of the forest, an area that contained ancient pagan relics and the power of the old gods. But the story truly begins long before the gatekeeper himself was cursed, in a time when pagan tribes inhabited the edge of the Black Forest, practicing ancient rituals dedicated to the gods of nature, the earth, and death. On the darkest night of winter, under a sky devoid of stars, the people of the forest would gather for the winter solstice ritual. This was a time when they believed the veil between the living world and the realm of the spirits was thinnest, allowing for a brief moment of communion with the gods. The ritual was not only to honor the gods, but to ensure that the harsh winter would not claim too many lives. The villagers built a massive pyre in the center of a hidden grove, nestled deep in the Black Forest beyond the sight of any Christian settlements. The fire would burn for hours, consuming wood and bone alike, sending plumes of smoke into the air as an offering to the gods. Around the pyre, 12 men and women, one for each month of the year, danced in a circle, their faces painted with symbols of the earth and sky. Their chanting grew louder as the fire roared. They called upon the spirits of Fru Holly, the ancient matron of fertility, harvest, and death. To them, Fru Holly was the embodiment of life's cycles, birth, death, and rebirth. As the solstice marked the longest night of the year, it was also a time of hope, for it signified the eventual return of the sun and the renewal of life. But on this particular night, something went terribly wrong as the villagers chanted, calling to Frau Holly. Their voices reached a place they should never have touched, a place deep within the Black Forest, where the old magic still lingered. The earth beneath them trembled, and the wind carried a low, menacing growl. The Black Forest Gatekeeper had been awakened by his long slumber, or from his long slumber. The Gatekeeper was once a druid, a man chosen by the spirits of the forest to serve as its eternal protector. In life, he had been a powerful figure, revered by the pagan tribes for his wisdom and connection to the earth. But with his power came a curse. He was bound to the forest for all of eternity, neither dead nor alive, a spirit tethered to the land he once protected. His task was to guard the deepest parts of the forest where the ancient gods still slept, ensuring that no mortal ever ventured too far into their sacred domain. Over the centuries, he had become a forgotten myth, known only to the trees and the whispers of the wind. But now the villagers had disturbed the delicate balance, summoning something they could not control. The ground beneath their feet cracked open, and from the shadows of the forest the gatekeeper emerged. His form was towering, cloaked in dark and shadow, his eyes glowing a fierce red. He carried a staff made from the twisted branches of the oldest trees in the forest, and with each step the ground beneath him shuddered. The villagers froze in terror. They knew they had summoned something far older, far more dangerous than Frau Holly. The gatekeeper's voice boomed through the clearing, though his lips never moved. He spoke the language of the forest, a language no human had heard in centuries. With a single motion, the gatekeeper raised his staff, and the trees around the clearing began to twist and writhe. The roots of the ancient oaks and pines snaked from the ground, wrapping around the villagers' legs, pulling them into the earth. Their screams echoed through the forest, but there was no escape. The gatekeeper had returned to his vigil, and the villagers who had disturbed the old magic were never seen again. Yet this was not the end. Their ritual had done more than summon the gatekeeper. It had torn open a passage between worlds, a portal that allowed spirits and creatures from the other side to cross into the mortal realm. And from the depths of the black forest, the ancient spirits stirred. Deep beneath the roots of the forest lived the dwarves and gnomes, creatures of the earth who had guarded the treasures of the underworld for centuries. They were master craftsmen, known for their ability to forge powerful artifacts from the metals of the earth. But they were also mischievous and vengeful, known to curse those who ventured too close to their hidden tunnels. When the portal opened, the dwarves felt the disturbance immediately. The earth trembled, and the air filled with the scent of magic. Curious and greedy by nature, the dwarves emerged from their underground lairs, eager to see what new power had been unleashed in the forest. Their beady eyes gleamed in the moonlight as they crept through the underbrush, watching as the gatekeeper drug the last of the villagers into the ground. The gnomes, smaller and more mischievous than the dwarves, followed closely behind. They had little interest in the conflict itself, but were drawn to the chaos, sensing an opportunity for mischief and trickery. They whispered to one another in their strange sing-song language, planning how they might use the disruption to their advantage. But the opening of the portal had awakened more than just the dwarves and gnomes. It had also stirred the ancient werewolves that had long prowled the darkest corners of the Black Forest. The werewolves of the Black Forest were not like the wolves of legend who transformed only with the full moon. These creatures were cursed to walk between human and beast at all times, their souls trapped in the liminal state. They had once been men and women who had offended the gods, condemned to a life of eternal hunger and bloodlust. They roamed the forest in packs, hunting anything unfortunate enough to cross their paths. The werewolves sensed the opening of the portal immediately. They could feel the magic in the air, the magic that called to their primal nature. It filled them with a wild hunger, and they began to converge on the clearing where the ritual had taken place. Their eyes glowed in darkness, and their low growls echoed through the forest. As they prowled closer, they caught the scent of the dwarves and gnomes, but paid them little mind. Their true prey lay elsewhere. As the chaos unfolded in the forest, the spirit of Frau Holly began to stir. She was not bound to the forest in the same way the gatekeeper was, but she had long watched over the land, ensuring the cycles of life and death were respected. Though she was often depicted as a nurturing figure, her true nature was far more complex. Frau Holly was as much a goddess of death as she was of fertility. She controlled the seasons, bringing life with the spring and taking it away with the winter. The villagers had invoked her name, and though they had been consumed by their folly, her presence was now felt in the forest. Her form materialized in the heart of the forest, a tall, imposing figure with flowing silver hair and eyes that gleamed like the moon. She wore a cloak of snow and leaves, and her breath brought a cold wind that swept through the trees. The animals of the forest fell silent at her arrival, for they knew she was not a spirit to be trifled with. Frau Holly had been summoned, and she would not return to the underworld without taking what was owed to her. In the distance, the sound of hoofbeats echoed through the forest. The wild hunt had been summoned, its spectral riders galloping through the trees, led by an ancient nameless figure. The wild hunt was a force of chaos and death sweeping through the mortal realms to claim the souls of the living and the dead alike. They had no allegiance, no purpose beyond their endless hunt. The wild hunt had been called forth by the opening of the portal, and now they roamed the black forest, their ghostly forms flickering in and out of sight. The leader of the hunt, a figure cloaked in shadow with glowing red eyes, rode at the front. His hounds baying at his side, their howls echoing through the trees, sending shivers down the spines of anyone who heard them. The gatekeeper watched as the wild hunt approached, his glowing eyes narrowing. He knew that their presence meant only one thing. The balance of the forest had been irrevocably disturbed. There would be no peace until the portal was closed, and the spirits and creatures that had been unleashed were returned to their realms. But the gatekeeper had no intention of letting that happen. As the wild hunt closed in, the gatekeeper stood his ground, his staff raised high. The ground beneath him trembled, and the trees around him seemed to come to life, their branches twisted and reaching towards the sky. The dwarves and gnomes scattered, sensing the imminent danger, while the werewolves howled in fury. Frau Holly watched from a distance, her eyes gleaming with cold indifference. She had no stake in this battle. She was merely an observer, watching as the forces of the forest clashed. The leaders of the wild hunt dismounted. The leader of the wild hunt dismounted, his spectral form towering over the gatekeeper. For a moment, the two figures stood in silence, their eyes locked in a silent challenge. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, the wild hunt charged. The forest erupted into chaos as the gatekeeper and the wild hunt clashed, their battle shaking the very foundations of the earth. The trees groaned and creaked as they were torn apart, and the ground split open as the magic of the forest surged. But in the end, the gatekeeper stood victorious. The leader of the wild hunt fell. His spectral form dissipated into the air, and the remaining riders fled into the darkness. The portal began to close, and the creatures of the forest retreated to their hiding places, leaving the gatekeeper alone in the clearing. His glowing eyes dimmed, and his staff sank into the earth. The black forest was silent once more. The gatekeeper returned to his eternal vigil, watching over the black forest as he had for centuries. The villagers who had disturbed the balance were gone, their bones claimed by the earth, but the legend of the gatekeeper lived on, passed down through generations as a warning to all who ventured too close to the forest, or to the heart of the forest. For the black forest was not just a place of trees and shadows, it was a place of ancient power, a place where the veil between the worlds was thin, and where the spirits of the old gods still roamed. And the gatekeeper would always be there, watching, waiting, and ensuring that the balance was never disturbed.